Everyone believes the katana is sharp. That belief is so widespread that it is almost never questioned. Movies show it slicing through armor. Games portray it as the ultimate blade. History books repeat the legend. Folded steel, secret techniques, divine craftsmanship. The katana, we are told, is inherently lethal. But here is the uncomfortable truth. A katana in the hands of an untrained person is often no more deadly than a heavy piece of steel. It may look beautiful. It may even be polished to perfection. But it does not fully function as a weapon. This is where the myth begins to crack. If the katana is objectively sharp, then why does it fail so often when wielded by someone who does not know how to use it? Why do untrained swings bounce, glance, or stop short? Why do beginners injure themselves more often than their targets? And why, historically, was the katana never treated as a simple weapon, but as something that demanded a lifetime of discipline? The popular explanation avoids these questions. It says the sharpness lies in the steel itself, in the metal, in the folding, in the heat, in the quenching process. According to this view, the sword does the work. The human merely swings it, but history does not support that conclusion. So, let us ask the real question, the one most stories never stop to examine. If the katana is so sharp, why does it only become truly lethal in the hands of someone who knows how to use it? This question shifts the focus away from the object and towards something far more uncomfortable: the human being holding it. To answer it, we must dismantle a deeply ingrained assumption that weapons are powerful on their own. In reality, the katana was never designed to be an autonomous instrument of destruction. It was designed as part of a system. A system that included posture, timing, distance, intent, breathing, and psychological control. Remove the human mastery from that system, and the blade loses much of its supposed magic. This is not philosophical abstraction. It is mechanical reality. A katana does not cut because it is sharp. It cuts because of how force is delivered across the edge. The angle, the speed, the path of the blade, the moment of contact, all of these are controlled by the user. Without that control, the blade behaves like any other piece of metal encountering resistance. Early European observers misunderstood this completely. When they first encountered Japanese swords, they marveled at their sharpness, yet dismissed Japanese swordsmanship as ceremonial or overly formal. They saw the blade, but not the system behind it. As a result, they carried the wrong lesson back with them. The katana is special because of the metal. The samurai would have disagreed. In traditional Japanese thought, the sword was never separate from the swordsman. The weapon was considered an extension of the body and, more importantly, of the mind. A katana without a trained wielder was incomplete, unfinished in its function. This idea clashes violently with modern thinking. Today, we believe technology replaces skill. A sharper blade, a stronger gun, a smarter machine. These are expected to compensate for human weakness. We assume the object carries the power. The katana was built on the opposite assumption. It was built with the expectation that the user would be highly trained, deeply disciplined, and acutely aware of their own limitations. The blade was optimized not for brute force, but for precision under control. Without that control, its advantages collapse. This is why beginners often describe the katana as unforgiving. It punishes poor technique. It resists being forced. It demands correct angles and committed motion. A clumsy swing does not magically improve because the blade is sharp. Instead, the blade exposes the user's lack of understanding. This leads us to a critical realization. The katana is not sharp in the way people think it is. It is not sharp like a razor that cuts anything it touches. It is sharp in a conditional way. Its sharpness is activated only when certain conditions are met, conditions that exist entirely within the user. Those conditions include body alignment, edge orientation, timing, follow-through, and intent. Miss any one of them, and the blade's effectiveness drops dramatically. This explains something that myths never address: why samurais spend far more time training than fighting. If the sword alone were enough, training would be unnecessary. But if the sword depends on the user, then mastery becomes non-negotiable. And mastery was the point. The katana was forged for a culture that valued restraint over aggression, control over chaos, and discipline over impulse. In such a culture, a weapon that only works well in skilled hands makes perfect sense. It discourages recklessness. It rewards patience. It forces self-reflection. In other words, the katana does not merely test steel. It tests the person holding it. This brings us to the deeper investigation. If sharpness is not solely a property of the blade, then what exactly is it? Where does it truly come from? And why does ignorance make even the finest sword dull? To answer that, we must step away from modern myths and examine how the katana was actually designed to function, mechanically, historically, and philosophically. The next step is to look beyond the blade itself and into the relationship between tool and user. Because the truth is uncomfortable, and that is precisely why it has been ignored for so long.
To understand why a katana only becomes truly sharp in skilled hands, we must abandon the modern obsession with materials and return to the logic of systems. The katana was never engineered to overpower resistance through mass or brute force. Compared to European longswords, it is lighter. Compared to axes or polearms, it lacks leverage. Compared to blunt weapons, it offers little margin for error. On paper, it is not an efficient tool for chaos, yet on the battlefield, in the hands of a trained samurai, it was devastating. This contradiction forces a deeper investigation. A blade does not cut because it is sharp alone. It cuts because energy is transferred efficiently across a precise edge at a precise angle. That efficiency depends far more on how the blade moves than on how it was forged. This is where untrained users fail. Most people swing a sword as if it were a club. They rely on arm strength. They overcommit their shoulders. They break alignment between wrist, elbow, and spine. As a result, the edge does not meet the target cleanly. Instead of slicing, it collides. When collision happens, sharpness becomes irrelevant. The katana exposes this mistake immediately. Its curved edge is optimized for drawing cuts, movements where the blade travels through the target, not into it. Without understanding this principle, the user nullifies the blade's design. This is why early katana training focuses obsessively on basics that seem unrelated to combat. Foot placement, posture, breathing, grip pressure. These are not rituals. They are mechanical necessities. A slight misalignment in stance changes the arc of the blade. A tense grip dulls the cut. A rushed breath disrupts timing. Each error compounds the next, until the blade's theoretical sharpness never reaches the target. In this sense, the katana is brutally honest. It does not compensate for bad habits. It does not mask incompetence. It reflects the user's internal state with terrifying accuracy. Calm produces clean cuts. Tension produces failure. History reinforces this interpretation. Samurai texts rarely describe the sword as a killing machine. Instead, they describe it as a mirror, a tool that reveals fear, impatience, ego, and hesitation. The sword does not create these flaws. It exposes them. This explains a historical paradox that modern retellings ignore. Samurai were discouraged from drawing their swords unnecessarily. A katana was not meant to be waved around. Every draw carried consequence. Every cut required commitment. Why? Because a katana demands intent. Half-hearted motion produces half-functional results. A blade designed this way filters out recklessness. It ensures that only deliberate action is effective. Contrast this with modern weapons. Today's technology is built to reduce dependency on human skill. Firearms require minimal training to be lethal. Automation compensates for inaccuracy. Safety systems exist to protect the user from themselves. Power is externalized. The katana represents the opposite philosophy. It externalizes nothing. Responsibility stays entirely with the user. If the cut fails, the failure belongs to the person, not the tool. This design choice is not accidental. It reflects the world view of the culture that created it. Japanese swordsmiths did not attempt to make swords that cut no matter what. They made swords that reached their full potential only under discipline. In doing so, they bound ethics, skill, and lethality together. This is why the katana's sharpness cannot be separated from training. Without understanding distance, the blade strikes too early or too late. Without understanding timing, it meets resistance at the wrong moment. Without understanding control, the edge twists on impact and loses effectiveness. Each of these errors transforms a legendary weapon into dead weight. This also explains why stories of katana tests are often misunderstood. Cutting through armor, helmets, or bodies was never proof of raw sharpness. It was proof of mastery. The blade was constant. The variable was always the human. Seen through this lens, the katana's reputation becomes less mystical and more demanding. It is not a shortcut to power. It is a gatekeeper. Only those willing to submit to years of disciplined training gain access to what the blade can truly do. Everyone else holds an illusion, steel without function. This leads us toward an even more unsettling conclusion. The katana was never meant to empower the unskilled. It was meant to filter them out. A society that builds weapons this way is making a statement. Power without discipline is unacceptable. Violence without mastery is failure. Tools should amplify virtue, not replace it. Modern culture struggles to understand this idea because it contradicts our expectations. We want objects to do the work for us. We want sharpness without effort. We want results without transformation. The katana refuses all of that, and that refusal is the core of its true sharpness. In the final part, we will confront the philosophical consequence of this design. Because the katana does not just reveal how weapons work, it reveals how humans relate to power, responsibility, and control. And once that connection is made, the legend of the katana stops being about steel entirely. Once we accept that a katana's sharpness depends on the user, a final and far more uncomfortable question emerges. If the blade only works when the human is disciplined, then what the katana truly sharpens is not steel, but the person. This is where the legend has been consistently misunderstood. Modern storytelling treats the katana as a superior object. Ancient Japan understood it as a disciplinary device, a tool engineered not to maximize destruction, but to demand self-mastery before destruction was even possible. This distinction changes everything. A katana does not forgive hesitation. It does not reward rage. It does not respond well to panic. These are not accidental flaws. They are deliberate constraints. The blade was shaped to force alignment, physical, mental, and ethical, before it could function as intended. In this sense, the katana behaves less like a weapon and more like a test. Every draw is an examination of posture. Every cut is an examination of intent. Every failure reveals not a problem with the steel, but a weakness in the wielder. Over time, this feedback loop reshapes the user. This is why traditional training emphasized repetition over variation. Thousands of identical cuts, endless attention to details invisible to outsiders, not because samurai were obsessed with form, but because form was the only way to eliminate ego, haste, and waste. Sharpness, then, becomes an internal property. A calm mind produces efficient motion. Efficient motion produces clean cuts. Clean cuts preserve the blade. A preserved blade maintains sharpness. The cycle reinforces itself. Break the cycle anywhere, through arrogance, impatience, or fear, and the blade loses its edge in practice, even if it remains sharp in theory. This explains why katana care was treated as a moral act. Polishing the blade was not maintenance alone. It was reflection. Each imperfection on the edge told a story about misuse. Chips spoke of forced strikes. Rolls spoke of poor angles. Scratches spoke of neglect. The blade recorded the wielder's behavior with brutal honesty. In contrast, modern tools are designed to hide this feedback. We build systems that absorb error, compensate for weakness, and smooth over incompetence. When something fails, we blame the tool, upgrade the object, or add automation. Responsibility is diluted. The katana allows none of this. It creates a closed loop between action and consequence. If you misuse it, you suffer immediately, physically, tactically, or psychologically. If you respect it, it responds with precision. This dynamic is not accidental craftsmanship. It is embedded philosophy. This is why the katana cannot be dangerous in ignorant hands in the way myths suggest. Ignorance neutralizes it. A reckless person swinging wildly does not unlock the blade's potential. They suppress it. The katana refuses to amplify chaos. It amplifies coherence. And this leads to the final inversion of the myth. The katana is not sharp despite requiring skill. It is sharp because it requires skill. By refusing to function optimally for the untrained, it enforces a hierarchy of responsibility. Power is earned, not granted. Lethality is conditional, not automatic. This is an idea that modern culture finds deeply uncomfortable. We prefer weapons that democratize power, tools that make everyone equally dangerous, systems that remove friction between intent and outcome. The katana inserts friction deliberately. It slows the unready. It filters the impulsive. In doing so, it transforms violence into a discipline rather than an impulse. This is why samurai philosophy treated the sword as both life-giving and life-taking. Not because of mysticism, but because the same discipline that enables a clean cut also enables restraint. A person capable of precise violence is also capable of choosing not to use it. The katana sharpens judgment as much as steel. Seen this way, the original question finally resolves itself. Why is a katana only sharp when the user knows how to use it? Because the blade was never meant to replace human mastery. It was meant to require it. The steel does not carry the sharpness. The system does. The posture, the breath, the timing, the intent, all converge at the edge. Remove the human element, and the blade becomes inert potential. This is not a failure of design. It is the design. And it reveals something larger than swordsmanship. Any tool that truly matters works the same way. Knowledge without discipline is dull. Power without control is clumsy. Objects do not create mastery. They expose its absence. The katana endures in legend not because it is magical steel, but because it embodies a forgotten truth. Tools are only as sharp as the humans who wield them. That truth is uncomfortable. That is why it is rarely taught. But it is precisely why the katana still cuts through myth so cleanly, long after the battles have ended.